this is the story of an evil prince and how he was eventually defeated. He was a bully, relished power, and hated good peaceful people. My story describes the events that led up to his demise. I hope it will encourage others who are in the midst of fighting an oppressive power not to give up. One thing to remember is that no matter who you are or what battle you face, if you do the right thing you can't go wrong. And no matter how bad things get, there is a way through if you keep holding on to love. The worst bully is not as strong as you think, and is really nothing more than a coward for picking fights with good people. The aim of telling you this story is to encourage you to stay true to your ideals, because the right path will lead to the greatest rewards. And finally, you'll be surprised how to defeat a bully, and it's not by using their tactics. My story begins many years ago with a king who had 3 sons. They were each 1 year apart in age, and the king loved them all dearly. There was no reason for any of them to turn evil, because they enjoyed a happy childhood and had fun together. Their parents gave them everything they needed to become wise young men. But when they were all in their late teens, their mother died suddenly. This changed everything as the king fell sick too, some say from heartache, and he told his sons, "Go all 3 of you, to the Forest of Wisdom to receive your inheritance." The Forest of Wisdom was a place where blessings and curses were dispensed, so no one ventured there without good reason. The king told his eldest son, "You will be the ruler after me, as you are the oldest. Remember that with great power comes great responsibility, so rule with discernment and strength. And treat your other brothers well, so as not to make them jealous of your power." The king's 3 sons traveled to the Forest of Wisdom and beneath the largest and oldest oak tree, received their inheritance. There were 3 crowns, each with an inscription and blessing. The eldest son received a crown which read, "Lord of the Strong and Wise." The second son received a crown which read, "Lord of the Animals." And the youngest received a crown which read, "Lord of all Cowards." As they each looked at their crowns, they did not know why each had been given different blessings, and wondered if some blessings were better than others. It was the first time in their lives that they fully recognized they all had different futures awaiting them. The second son had never liked animals and had even been cruel to some of his pets in the past, so he wondered why he had been given lordship over them. He did not consider it a good blessing. The eldest son was happy with his title and believed wisdom and strength were key aspects in ruling the land well after his father was no longer king. So he quickly got on his horse and was soon on his way back to the king's castle. During his trip back to the castle, he was attacked by several large serpents. He was strong enough to conquer the reptiles and was not injured. But when he had slayed them, he looked up and saw his brother, Lord of the Animals, standing nearby. "Why did the animals attack me?" asked the eldest brother. The second oldest brother said, "I don't know. It's very strange indeed." As the eldest brother went to get back on his horse again, his brother, Lord of the Animals, came up behind him and stabbed him in the back. Then a dragon came and devoured the body. So there was nothing left of the eldest brother, except his crown. The second oldest brother took the crown and put it on his own head, thinking he would now be Lord of the Strong and Wise. But the moment he did, the inscription changed to read, "The Dark Prince." He could not hide his murderous ways now. And he could not remove the crown from his head. He thought of running away, but then heard news that his father had died, and that he was now ruler of the land. He took over and told his youngest brother to keep his distance, lest a creature attack him too. Over time, the Dark Prince did much evil. He learned how to cast spells and used magic to make himself more powerful. The people in his kingdom fled to avoid being hurt by him, so he was alone in his castle. He never grew much taller than he had been as a young lad, but every inch of him was now rotten to the core. He didn't care about anyone or anything. Where you would expect a heart, there was just an empty black hole in his chest. All he cared about was using his own power to make good people miserable. He hated them because deep down he knew they were stronger than him. For it takes greater strength to stand up for what is right than to become corrupted and evil. Not all the animals obeyed him anymore, but some still did. They were heartless like him. His magical pet rats were his main weapon. They would swarm from his kingdom into the world and whisper evil thoughts to everyone they got close to. The rats were invisible, so it was easy for them to spread lies and cause people to swallow untruths. Now, in the world lived a particular girl whom the Dark Prince's rats spoke to. Her name was Sarah, and in the mornings when she was brushing her hair in front of the mirror, the invisible rats would gather and tell her she was no good. Sarah began to think she needed to please everyone to be accepted. So, she worked hard to do the right thing, which infuriated the Dark Prince. Why is she so concerned with being good? The Dark Prince wanted her to behave badly. He thought, I will show her the benefits that come from being evil. Tonight, when she falls asleep, I will pluck her from her bed, using my magic powers, and let her experience life in my castle, with all its pleasures. So he did this.
You're not on my level. You say that I've crossed the line way too many times, but baby, I'm a rebel. I can hear the rumors, let them know it's true. You can talk about it while I'm making moves, 'cause I'm out here living like I always do. So if you don't approve, you can say I've lost my mind, dancing with the devil. I'm up to it, more than on the level. I'm on this ride, living like a rebel on the loose. I'm on the loose, rebel on the
Sarah was wined and dined by the Dark Prince. She was treated like a princess. At the end of the night, the Dark Prince told her, "Say my name, and you will receive anything you want." Sarah said his name, knowing full well he was evil, and a burning sword struck the prince in the chest. But since he had no heart, he was not killed. "You're evil and I want you gone," cried Sarah. The Dark Prince became furious and told her, "I won't leave you alone now, you will never be free of me now." From then on, once a year, the Dark Prince took her to his kingdom and forced her to sit in the cold while he taunted her. The rest of the time his rats tried their best to trip her up with discouraging words and lies. Sarah grew up into a young woman who was frustrated that the Dark Prince would not leave her alone. But of course, this was natural since good and evil always clash. Sarah wondered if others were also plagued by him. She was right in thinking this. There were many others, she just didn't know who they were. The problem was she never told anyone about what he was doing to her because she was afraid no one would believe her. the Dark Prince just grew stronger because of this. Then one day Sarah met a young man named Peter. Peter came from a wealthy family, similar to the Dark Prince, and he bore a striking resemblance to the prince. Sarah felt Peter was familiar in some way, but could not explain why. So, she felt comfortable around him and even considered telling him about the Dark Prince. Of course she likes Peter, thought the Dark Prince. I have such a hold over her that she will fall for anyone who is similar to me, without realizing it. She is on the lookout for someone strong and powerful, and hasn't grasped the fact that men like that easily succumb to evil ways.
Hey, you know what I came to do? I feel like I'm made for you. Feel like, feel like, feel like, feel like. Hey, you know what I came to do? I feel like I'm made for you. Feel like, feel like, feel like, feel like.
Yo, it's like this. Hey yo, you be my peace, keep me going off the deep end. Looking forward to every part of you like the weekend. Used to have a man, but he was disrespectful. Never met your needs and he made you feel neglectful. Everything's materialistic and yeah, that's probably fine. But what good is everything except quality time? You my favorite instrumental, I'm the version. On the weekend we don't keep it distant like a work friend. Keep me on the right track, listen I'll be right back. Shorty said she like that, yeah I know she like that. See I believe in soulmates, they say they know me well. I've been loving you for centuries to show and tell. I know that you can tell and listen, use my one and only. Got you a personal shopper, yeah, shout out to Tony. And we gon' keep it moving, listen, we gon' be forever. I just look up in your eyes and I see
you know
forever.
what I came to do? I feel like I'm made for you. Feel like, feel like, feel like, feel like. Hey, you know what I came to do? I feel like I'm made for you. Feel like, feel like, feel like, feel like.
Yo, hey yo, memories daily just like the first date. Your boss is a jerk, you got to work late. What's a couple minutes, all it is a paycheck. And you got bigger dreams than that, in your way, yeah. You wanna start your own business, you wanna get it together. You wanna race to the finish, you gotta do it forever. This your time now, relationship the usual. And see you been there, stop attending that funeral.
I don't wanna judge you, I just wanna love you. Come here, let me hug you, ain't no one above you. Let me put it right here. We be in the night, yeah, feeling like a light, yeah. Feeling like it's quite clear. I don't wanna judge you, I just wanna love you. Come here, let me hug you, ain't no one above you. Let me put it right here. We be in the night, yeah, feeling like a light, yeah. Feeling like it's quite clear.
Yeah, I just feel it's me and you, we forever see. We should turn off the lights, shout out to Teddy P. It's a forever thing, no need for wedding rings. Cause I got you in my soul, baby girl, let's go.
But Sarah thought she could trust Peter. He is one of the good guys, she told herself. Together the couple discussed life, religion, adventure, and the books and music they both enjoyed. When Peter proposed to Sarah she accepted and the Dark Prince laughed. Right away Peter's parents were suspicious of Sarah. She just wants to live a privileged life, they told Peter. She is not of noble birth, so should perform a test to prove she is fit to be your wife. They persuaded Peter to go along with their wishes. Peter told Sarah, my family are nobles, and they have demanded that you perform a test of endurance to prove you are fit to be my wife. They have suggested that to prove your determination, zeal and steadfastness for me, you must withstand 7 days and 7 nights outside in the cold of winter. It was the kind of test Peter's parents felt sure Sarah wouldn't be able to complete. Sarah loved Peter and tried her best. But after just one night she grew exhausted and could not continue. She could not bear to go through the same treatment she had received at the hands of the Dark Prince. In despair, she ran away into the wilderness. Peter was disappointed and hurt, thinking she did not truly love him. He stopped thinking about her. And that could well have been the end of the matter, except that soon after, the Dark Prince decided to snatch everyone in the village and take them all to his kingdom. He was interested to see which of the villagers would cry out for mercy first. It turned out to be Peter's parents. Oh, the irony! Even Peter was not as strong as Sarah and began to weep. The Dark Prince told them they were all weaklings and not as strong as Sarah. I enjoyed tormenting and bullying her much more because she didn't just fall to pieces and start crying like you lot did, the Dark Prince told them. When Peter realized that Sarah had been hurt by this evil man, he was outraged and felt terrible. After the Dark Prince released them, they found themselves back in their beds, feeling cold and terrified. Many of the villagers wondered if it had been just a dream, but Peter knew it had been real. From that moment on, he did everything he could to find Sarah. He searched far and wide until he found her. "Will you please forgive me?" he asked Sarah. "I will never again ask you to prove yourself to me. I am truly sorry." The Dark Prince may have magic on his side, but he will not be able to stand against us if we all fight him together. He is but one man, after all. Sarah was so happy to hear this, because she still loved Peter, and so, they planned to marry. Many nobles united and a plan was hatched to attack the Dark Prince and overthrow him. "We can surely win against him if we all band together," the men said to themselves. And well, they could have. But when the Dark Prince learned of the impending attack, he proceeded to send the handsome nobleman an anonymous wedding gift. It arrived on the day of their wedding. Peter unwrapped the present and saw that it was a dark crown made of black rhinestones. He was naturally impressed by the gift and even considered it had been sent to him by a friend. But he should not have been fooled by the dark nature of the crown, as no friend would have sent such a wedding gift. He foolishly put it on his head, and the moment he did, Peter was turned into a donkey. Then he knew the crown was from the Dark Prince. Peter ran to Sarah and told her, "I can't marry you, Sarah. Not like this. The Dark Prince must really hate you to do this to me. He is just too powerful to be stopped." When the other nobles heard the terrible news, they became afraid and called off the attack. Sarah grew upset. She started to see the outlines of the Dark Prince's realm appear in the distance. "I guess the only way forward is to face him alone," she thought. As Sarah came to the edge of the Dark Prince's kingdom, a strong man approached her. "I am the youngest brother of the Dark Prince," the man said. "I am lord of all cowards. I know each of them by name, including Peter, who is now a donkey because of his foolishness. Turn back. You don't want to go into the realm of the Dark Prince willingly, because he will try to trap you there for good." But Sarah thought, "What have I got to go back to? If I don't fight the Dark Prince, he will plague my life forever." The strong man went straight to Peter the ass and told him, "Your bride is on her way to defeat my brother. Know this, to defeat him, he will try to trick her into giving up all her love, innocence, and remorse. He wants her to become devoid of godly emotions as he is himself. Because he knows that if you fight fire with fire, you can't win. If you are the same as the thing you are fighting, then there is no real victory. If you are just as evil as the thing you are fighting, you change nothing. If that should happen to Sarah, I will come after you and punish you." Peter was shocked by this and said, "But why?" The strong man replied, "For being a coward. You were about to marry Sarah and look how easily you gave up on her. You must help her, because only with love do you have any chance of defeating the Dark Prince. She needs you." Immediately Peter felt ashamed at how he had given up so quickly. He did not know how he would help Sarah as a donkey, but he was determined to try. Meanwhile, Sarah came across a black crow on a post, and it spoke to her. "This path leads to certain death." But she replied, "Fly ahead of me and tell me what lies before me, if you are willing." The crow said, "3 lands lie before you, the first is the land of no love." So, she asked the crow, "What is in the land of no love?" "Sulfur pools and salt lakes. The air is full of toxic fumes, and it is extremely hot. It is an inhospitable place and stretches many hundreds of miles. You might as well give up now, because there is no way through. The Dark Prince has made sure his kingdom is impenetrable. And the longer you remain in the land, the more you will lose your love for others. But Sarah said, I don't believe it. There must be a way through. The crow squawked, take my advice and turn back. Go home, find someone new to love and marry him. Then the Dark Prince will leave you alone. But Sarah said, he'll never leave me alone. Anyway, I don't want to fall in love a second time. I only love Peter, and if I can't be with him, then I will not be with anyone. The crow said, you're such a child, with naive ideas. Besides, can't you see how much Peter is like the Dark Prince? His rich life spoils him. She saw it but would not listen. You don't want me to be happy at all. You're not trying to help me. You're on the Dark Prince's side. She grabbed hold of the crow and said, I'll not let go of you unless I die here. Then she entered the land of no love. Now, not everything in life is what it seems, so when Sarah was considering a path to take to avoid the acidic pools, and a monster rose up from the sulfur and loomed in front of her, she was horrified. But the monster tried to cover itself and cried out, don't look at me. Sarah looked away and realized it was not interested in attacking her. Instead, it seemed to be concerned with asking her strange questions. When you search for something, why is it always in the last place you look? The monster asked Sarah. She was confused and asked, what? But the monster cried out, no, I need you to ask, why? So she asked why, and the monster cried out, because when you find it, you stop looking. Sarah responded, yes, that makes sense. Did you find what you were looking for? But this upset the monster, who was almost in tears. It fired another question at Sarah. Why was 6 afraid of 7? Sarah asked why. The monster cried, because 7, 8, 9. Sarah said, okay. The monster cried out, how do bees brush their hair? Sarah said, I don't know. The monster replied, they use honeycombs. Sarah wondered what was going on. The monster was close to tears, but was obviously trying to tell her jokes. After several more jokes, Sarah finally cracked a smile. At this point, the crow she was holding squawked, you'll never reach the Dark Prince like this. But the monster seemed happier now that Sarah had at least smiled. It told her more jokes, and she obliged it by laughing. Immediately, the monster began to convulse. Don't look at me, it cried. Sarah looked away again, but was quite disturbed. She heard strange noises for several more minutes, then all of a sudden there was silence. She looked up and saw the monster was gone, and in its place was a young man wearing a pointed hat and a cape with stars on it. The man was so grateful to her. He told Sarah, my name is Frank. I am a wizard and have been trapped here for years because one of my spells backfired and turned me into a monster. I arrived here on horseback and thought casting a spell to give it wings would help us fly over this terrible land, but unfortunately I am hopeless at transformation spells. My horse galloped away and I was left a monster trying to undo the spell. Even though I was hideous, I had hundreds of lame jokes bubbling up inside me that I had an urge to share. So I have been waiting for someone to tell them to, knowing that if they laughed at them and did not run away, the spell would be broken. But it's a lot of pressure to be funny, you know, which is why I was close to tears. Thank you for laughing at my jokes. Sarah said, that's okay. The man said, I will help you now, because you helped me. He began to cast a new spell, but Sarah became concerned. What if it backfires again? She asked. But Frank said she shouldn't worry. I have had plenty of time to consider how to cast the spell. He cast the spell, and immediately the acidic pools and salt lakes were replaced by a beautiful meadow. Frank told Sarah, now you can pass through this land with no problems. But tell me, why do you want to travel to the Dark Prince? So Sarah told him her story. When Frank heard about Peter, he asked, wow, would you really never marry another man if you couldn't be with Peter? Surely you can love more than one person in your lifetime. Especially if he's a donkey now and has given up on your love. Sarah thought, maybe, it is a bit ridiculous. If you want, I will come with you to help you defeat the Dark Prince. I am not afraid of him, said Frank. Sarah decided to accept his offer. They walked through the beautiful meadow, and it was not long before Sarah stopped thinking about Peter. She wasn't in love with him or anyone else now for that matter, and didn't mind. Maybe life is more fun when you don't have to care about anyone but yourself, she said. Why torture yourself with trying to chase after perfect love? Frank agreed. Both their hearts were growing colder and they were getting meaner. They did not consider that this was because of the land of no love that they were both passing through. Even though it looked nice now, it was deceptive because it was still part of the Dark Prince's kingdom and was magical. The roses sang songs about not living to please others and setting your own rules in life. Just do whatever makes you happy, don't worry if you hurt others, sang the roses. Sarah found this liberating. They were taking their time and smelling all the roses they passed by. I think I have never felt happier, admitted Sarah. But it was a selfish kind of happiness. Meanwhile, Peter, who was now a scared donkey and was traveling behind Sarah, came to the meadow too. He overheard butterflies chatting about how Sarah had given up her love for him and was traveling through the land with Frank, the magician. Who is this Frank? He thought to himself. He could tell the land he was traveling through was evil because the roses sang songs about how the journey through life matters more than the final destination. He knew this was a lie, intended to make good people care less about heaven. The roses also sang as though they did not believe in heaven, and that people should just try to grab what happiness they could from this life, as short as it may be. Peter thought to himself, I don't blame Sarah for falling out of love with me, I am a fool and a coward after all. But I pray with all my heart that Sarah doesn't get tricked into becoming evil because of the Dark Prince. He hurried after them, trying to catch up with them. In the distance, Sarah carried on, holding the crow tightly in her hand. What lies before me? She asked. It replied, the land of disturbing things. It is full of thousands of mirrors. Only one leads out of the land. But you will never find it. And the longer you stay trapped in the land, the less innocent you will become. We'll find it, don't worry, said Frank. They entered the land feeling confident. There were mirrors everywhere and their reflections seemed to loom up around them. As the two of them walked past the mirrors, they saw their reflections behaving badly. First they were playing drinking games and getting really drunk. Sarah and Frank grew embarrassed watching them, hoping it would stop, but couldn't look away. That's not us, they tried to argue, so they wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But it didn't help. As time went on, they started to see the funny side and laughed at their reflections. What's wrong with being silly? It's better than feeling sad or being too uptight, right? They watched as their reflections got more intoxicated and began to philosophize about life as well as swear, using all manner of foul language, even inventing words that didn't exist. Sarah was shocked at first by the dirty words that were coming out of her reflection's mouth, but then began to marvel at the sheer absurdity of it all. This is crazy, oh dear, I can't even understand half of what our reflections are saying. Could I really be saying all of that? Then they saw their reflections get sick from all the alcohol. Sarah wanted to look away again, but couldn't because everywhere she turned there was a mirror and a reflection of her and Frank. They watched as the vomit took on the shape of a donkey. Oh no, please, Namara, remind yourself, Peter, Sarah squirmed uncomfortably. Sarah and Frank were engrossed now and hooked on what they were watching. Their reflections began to dance around them hypnotically. Are we real, or are they real? Sarah wondered. They had completely forgotten why they were there, and no longer wanted to do anything but keep staring at the mirrors. At that moment they heard someone cry out, "Leave them alone." They turned and saw Peter the donkey rear up and smash one of the mirrors. Sarah and Frank were startled and saw that all the mirrors had now gone black. "Peter, what are you doing here?" asked Sarah, as she tried to gather her wits together. Peter said, "Trying to stop the Dark Prince from turning you evil like him." Sarah grew upset. "I am hardly turning evil. What are you talking about?"
So I've been biding my time, twisting my fate. I watch the clock, but it's too late. In my life, in just one way, it's coming down till everything goes to zero. Baby, everything goes to zero. When it's going down, it's coming to zero. This life I'm living, I'm shaking the nest, 'cause I want it right now, and I wanna live. The life I'm living is gonna be enough when it all goes down to 0 degrees in these eyes. Just so no one can rage against us. When the fire, it will start burning through the city lights.
Peter didn't want to get into an argument with Sarah, but said, "We need to find a way out of this land." Frank said, "How do you expect we are going to do that now that the mirrors are black and broken?" Peter trotted around the mirror he had broken, thinking out loud. "I love you, Sarah, and I know you don't love me anymore, but I think that love is what will get us out of here." The Dark Prince expected we wouldn't have that faculty anymore by the time we got to his second land. But love is more powerful than magic. "I broke this mirror out of love for you. I couldn't have broken it otherwise. Look how it has made all the other mirrors black. Maybe it's not about finding a particular mirror, I could have broken any one of them. But about the act of love, that determines the way out." As Peter said this, he stepped through the broken mirror and disappeared. This greatly surprised Sarah and Frank. They said, "Maybe he's right. Let's see for ourselves." They stepped through the mirror and the crow squawked angrily at them. When they passed through the mirror, they saw Peter waiting for them on the other side. He pointed to a distant castle on the horizon. "I think that is where the Dark Prince lives," said Peter. The crow that Sarah was still holding on to squawked, "You're heading straight to the land of no remorse, where the prince keeps his sword. You must give up your conscience to wield it and fight the Dark Prince." All three of them saw that upon the highest tower a sword was shimmering in the light. But its blade was partly embedded in a rock. "If I fight him, I will become just like him, won't I?" she said. The crow squawked, "Of course. That is what the Dark Prince wants." Peter told Sarah, "You can't do it." But Sarah said, "I have to try." Frank thought that there must be another way, which they had not considered. "I will turn myself into a sword for you, Sarah," said Frank. "You can use me to fight the Dark Prince, then you will not turn evil because you won't need to wield the Dark Prince's sword." Frank cast a transformation spell, but it backfired and he was turned into a carrot. Sarah tried not to get upset by this. She went into the castle and climbed to the top of the highest tower. She felt she had no other options left. She pushed the rock off the edge of the tower and it broke apart when it hit the ground, freeing the sword. Peter was below, and trotted over to the sword, which now lay on the ground beside him. Just then the Prince of Darkness stepped out of the shadows and revealed himself. He stood behind Sarah and began to speak. She turned around in shock. "How pathetic you are," he said to her. "Your friend Frank is a carrot and Peter is a scared donkey. Do you really think you can win against me when all the cards are stacked against you?" Right now Peter is faced with eating that delicious carrot, and he will at some point, because he will never be able to leave this place. Sarah shook her head. Peter won't eat the carrot, and I will defeat you." The Dark Prince laughed. "You don't know anything. You're still as clueless as ever. You can't trust Peter. He never followed you here on his own accord. He is only here to save his own neck. If you give up your remorse and attack me, he is fated to suffer at the hands of my brother, and he knows this." Sarah was shocked and asked Peter if this was true. He tried to explain. "I had to try and stop you for both our sakes." Sarah told him, "I am not upset with you, Peter. I know the Dark Prince wants me to hate everyone close to me, but I don't." She was terrified of the Prince of Darkness as he stepped closer to her. "Goodness will conquer," she gasped, but these words meant nothing to the Dark Prince as he pushed her off the tower. When she hit the ground, Peter was by her side. She did not feel any pain, but was comforted by his nearness. Her last words to him were, "I do still love you, Peter. The Dark Prince can't take that from me. Love is more important than life." Peter moved over to the sword and tried to grab it, but he was a donkey and couldn't. The Dark Prince called out to his crow, "Finish him." The crow ruffled its feathers, and as some fell to the ground they turned into a legion of armed soldiers. Peter was appalled, and cried out, "Come fight me like a man, instead of hiding behind your army." The Dark Prince just laughed, so Peter cried out again, "You're nothing but a bully and a coward." "I know, because it takes one to know one." The sky turned gray and lightning flashed all around them. Now the Dark Prince cursed and swore because never in his life had he been called a coward. But what had been said was the truth, and it changed everything. He was a coward for picking fights with good, peaceful people, and using his dark powers against them, something that his youngest brother knew all too well. The strong man, Lord of all cowards, appeared in the storm clouds and looked down at the Dark Prince. "You're mine now," he told his brother. "I've waited a long time for this." The Dark Prince looked uncomfortable as he realized he was now under the dominion and rulership of his younger brother. He started to grovel, but it did not help. They stood before each other motionless for a moment, then lightning struck the Dark Prince, and he was destroyed. At that moment, Peter saw that the spell he was under was broken and he was no longer a donkey. Frank was back to being himself and was so grateful that he threw away his wizard's hat and swore he would never practice magic again. Sarah was healed, and all three of them knew that the kingdom of the Dark Prince was no more. They walked out of the land towards their homes, and thanked God for preserving their lives. Sarah and Peter recommitted themselves to each other, and built a life together and were faithful to each other into their old age. Frank was happy for them and went on to tell the story to everyone he could because it was so amazing and true.